Join us, MrTruck.com, for truck reviews, trailer reviews, and accessory reviews.
In unison?
Yes, we're coughing up a storm here. We are at my brother Roland Sundling's 80th birthday party somewhere in Oklahoma, an undisclosed location. But I always wanted to interview my brother because he's the oldest in the family. I'm the youngest in the family. You were born in 1939?
Yes, that's correct. 1939.
Well, that's cool. I was in 57, so I think I'm 18 years difference.
Graduated from high school in 1957.
Wow, that is too cool. So we have a lot of numbers that are correlated here. This is good. Now, the thing about Roland is he's 80 years old, so he's done a lot. I mean, he's lived everywhere. He's been everywhere. He's had some jobs that I've never even heard of before that are really cool, and I want to get him on tape, have him tell us about his history. Now, he's born out by Akron, Colorado. Was that wasn't a hospital, or what was it?
No, it was in town.
Well, was that a hospital there?
No, I don't know if they had a hospital then.
Okay. Well, I guess they built the hospital when I was born. So anyway, but Roland has been, such a really cool character. And I want him to tell us about what all he did. I mean, he started off like I did on the farm, and then he did the harvest crew with J.B. Perry, went to Oklahoma and cut wheat and came all the way up and did all that. And you probably want to tell us your story, but I remember a lot of this, even though I was young.
You were born right at that time, but you remember it all. Is that what you're telling me?
I remember from 3 years old is where it starts. But yeah, you've done some incredible things, and I just want to get it recorded so we can all talk about it later and talk about you later behind your back.
All right.
But anyway, starting with the wheat field.
Well, okay. I worked a number of places, but I'll just go through sort of a summary that I used when I graduated, or when I retired, actually.
Yeah, cool.
So I had retirement. Okay, so this was in 2002, I think. But anyway, this is what I had to say. Once upon a time, long, long ago, well, it seems only yesterday, I was attending a one-room school in eastern Colorado. The teacher's daughter and I were in the first grade together in Antelope Springs Grade School. In second grade, the class size was 2 girl cousins and I. Big class. Third through the 7th grade, I was the only one in my grade. Can you imagine that? That was a one-room school. By 8th grade, school consolidation put me on a 40-mile-per-day bus ride into Akron, Colorado. Such were my beginnings in the fast lane in the winter wheat country.
Yeah. That's what Washington County, Akron's known for, the number one wheat county. That is so good, but I don't know if you go clear up to the schoolhouse, but the house that I grew up in was the 1918 Sears and Roebuck, and you grew up in a different house, but the living room was your one-room schoolhouse that Dad added to it.
Right. You guys did do some changing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, excuse me. Down on the farm, why, yes, I plan to be a farmer. 4-H and Future Farmers of America, half a day in ag classes learning tools of the trade, livestock judging contests, showing registered hogs at the county fair. Such was life in the fast lane on the farm. After graduation from Akron High School, math was my favorite subject. I counted my brothers and sisters down on the farm. 4 sisters and 3 brothers. As the oldest of 8, I surmised that my youngest brother had a chance of farming.
Well, kind of. That was me.
But not me. So down on the farm became Go West, young man, go west. Not Horace Greeley, Colorado, but Denver. My mom and dad had both graduated from grade school, hence their goal for their clan was high school graduation. After graduating, 3rd place out of 23, monstrous class, after the class size of 1 ritual, I enrolled in Park School of Business and Higher Accounting. Martin Marietta was hiring at the Waterton plant south of Denver, the makers of Titan missile. I applied. Now Go West, young man, go west became we have ignition on second stage. The mighty Titan missile successfully launched our first space vehicle into orbit. I remember the factory floor with Titan missiles laid end to end in different states of fabrication. Vertical test where the missile was upright for systems test. The static test stands in the foothills where the engines first roared to life. The rest of the story is in your program. Okay, I will now turn to a series of vignettes. I remember at the time you were born, actually.
Holy cow. That's one thing I don't remember.
Oh, you don't? Okay. I remember wheat harvest down on the farm. I remember following ripening of the wheat from Oklahoma to Kansas to Colorado to Wyoming. I returned to school, but the crew went on to Montana and Canada. I remember my first night as a truck driver. I slept in a wheat bin with grasshoppers hopping about as I tried to sleep. I remember driving a 2-ton truck with a combine on its back as I negotiated 90-degree turns near Scottsbluff, Nebraska. My clearance lights were shorting out at dusk. I made it to camp, but I was one scared 17-year-old. I remember the call from the head of the math department at Greeley West High School. He called me. He wanted me to call a former math teacher working as a computer programmer at NORAD. It's North American Air Defense Command. I called, passed an aptitude test for computer programming, and started the torturous route of getting a government position. I remember the cold winter nights while walking past the giant blast doors in Cheyenne Mountain. Then down the cold, windy tunnel to the waiting ride back to Air Force Base. That's been modernly, it's the modern day Olympics Training Center in Colorado Springs. At NORAD, we tracked everything in orbit. Even Santa Claus was known to be under the all-seeing eye of headquarters NORAD. Such is life in the supersonic lane of space. I remember my selection to the Advanced Management Program at National Defense University, Fort McNair, Washington, D.C. I became one of Al Gore's Reinventing Government Corps. The National Performance Review Hammer Awards, also known as 11th Wing Financial Management Travel Reengineering Project. Boy, that's a mouthful. This is life in the reengineering lane. I remember the blessing of family, a wife of over 50 years, a companion in rearing 2 youngins. Grace is a woman of many talents. She taught babies through chemistry labs at Pepperdine University and Biola University. Our family was recognized for the American Family Award at Luke Air Force Base for all of Tactical Air Command. I remember a son earning a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, then 2 degrees in Bible, including a Master of Divinity. I remember a daughter who graduated in art and graphics, now working for Bill Gates in Seattle. I remember the blessing of church. If you measure my bookshelves at home, you will find about half are Bible related and the other half are computer related. Christianity is very important to me, and I'm teaching currently a course in Sermon on the Mount alongside Sean Casey at Fairfax Church of Christ. I remember his needs, her needs, interactive marriage seminar that Grace and I co-facilitated. Overall, we did basically 10 of them in California and Virginia. I remember all the talented people in 11th Wing FM, financial management, and we did all these things together. So this was a lot of personal things about that. I wish to thank the Lord Jesus Christ for opportunity to serve. There's another kind of fishing. I intend to remember that fishing for the souls of men and women is all important. So that's the end of the summary.
Well, you got a lot of job descriptions to go through too, don't you?
Well, I do. I'm probably not going to go into detail like that.
Well, do you want to summarize them? Because I know you went to so many cool places, whether it's Honeywell or IBM or the Air Force and the Pentagon. I mean, that's the deep stuff.
In the audience, I've got some old black and white. If you want one, pass it around. Okay, so
where did you go after NORAD?
Where did I go after NORAD? Let's see. I went from NORAD. I was there 10 years, and they trying to ship me out to a right pad in Ohio, and I didn't want to go to Ohio.
Okay.
So what I did is I got a job in Minneapolis. I went to work for Control Data Corporation, and they had contracts to build large, dense data stores. They had a triple hierarchy of data storage. They had the washing machines, which meant the big disk drives.
Right, I remember those great big tall reel-to-reels.
Yeah, those were dishwashers or clothes washers, whatever. And then the second tier was, let's see, I guess it was the tape. No, the second tier was this thing called a mass data file, because General Electric had to keep the data on every engine they produced for its entire life. Wow. So they had all this data that they had to account for, and they tried to get it squashed down into fewer cubic feet.
Was that all binary based too, or was that later on?
Let's see. Some computers were octal based, and some were hexadecimal based, and most of them were. IBM was one kind, and CDC was another kind, and Honeywell was another kind. So, anyway.
So that was three companies: CDC, Honeywell, and IBM. Did you all work for all three, or they contracted through one?
For Control Data, who had a contract, I think, with Honeywell for the GE engines to keep track of all that data. There were two plants. There was one in, where was it? In Massachusetts, Lynn, Massachusetts, and the other one was in Cincinnati, Ohio, I believe. It built the engines for General Electric.
I remember you moved around quite a bit. It seemed like you moved to Minnesota, and you ended up in Arizona.
Yeah, after NORAD, I went to Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I was up there for a winter and a half. So I figured that out.
Yeah, Minnesota, too many winters.
Yeah, that ice business. And we got our cross-country skis up there, though.
Oh, cool.
We bought cross-country skis. We lived out in the west part of town as Wayzata. Address, it was actually in Plymouth, but it's close to Minnetonka, the big lake. The Tonka toys, that's where they come from. Yeah, Minnetonka.
I did not know that. That's cool. Tonka.
Even you learned something here today.
That's true. I'm into gaining knowledge.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, you might try Wikipedia some, no.
Yeah, that like WikiLeaks. Go ahead.
Or WikiLeaks. No, I guess that's another way. But okay, so where was I? We
Minnesota. And then from where?
Minnesota, I got cross-country skis there, and learned to cross-country ski some, and you'd watch these people go out on the lake, and they would drill holes in the ice, and they thought those fish were worth it. They would set this little hut over the hole.
Yeah.
And I sure bring things out there to keep themselves warm.
Yeah. What else are you going to do in Minnesota in the winter? You only get so much.
Fish through the ice.
Yeah.
And of course, you always had to watch, because in the spring thaw, some of these people were too adventuresome, and they end up with their car on the bottom of the lake.
Yeah.
The ice
Yeah. It wasn't your Blazer. I don't know what car you had by then, because you had a lot of four-wheel drives and a lot of cars over there.
I had a Scout. International Scout.
Yeah, Scout 2, the green one. Yes.
Green one. Yeah, it was a green one. Came from the factory that way.
Yeah, back when you lived in the Black Forest, you built that house up there.
Yeah.
And then from Minnesota, did you go from there to Arizona, or where was it after Minnesota?
Yes, I was in the deep freeze there for a winter and a half,
Yeah.
and I decided that, there's got to be a better way. And so I actually followed the project from control data to Minneapolis Large Systems in Phoenix, because they were moving as a special project. It wasn't available to everybody. It was just for GE. So we moved to the great state of Arizona in the Florida. It was in the fall time. I went down like in October, and Grace waited for the kids out of school, and then she came down after school was out.
I remember the scorpion stories on the ceilings.
Yeah, they're interesting. In Arizona, we lived on one side of the street. Across the street, there's a row of houses, and then it was this big area called, what was it called? It was called Squaw Mountain. I think that's politically incorrect nowadays, so I think they've renamed it. I don't know what the new name is.
Yeah, they're changing a lot of names. The political correct is kind of getting crazy. But yeah, so then what happened to Arizona? Who did you work for in Arizona?
It was Honeywell Large Systems, they called it. It used to be a General Electric plant, but Honeywell bought them out, and then they started getting into computers, into the big systems. And so I worked there until I watched layoffs start in the hardware department. The big machines, I guess, were taken over by smaller machines, Unix machines. We had with the Multics. Multics, I thought, was a really interesting machine. It was a multi-user Unix, basically.
Was that a reel-to-reel too, or is that later?
No, this is they probably had tape drives still, but they didn't. The reels is what you fish with. Is that what?
In music industry, those are called reel-to-reel, the big tape drives. We don't talk, computer language. So then after Arizona, where did you go?
After Arizona, where did I go? Well, I was in Arizona. I was there quite a while. I think I was at Honeywell 10 years. And then, like I say, the layoffs went through the hardware, and then they started through the software, and I took my turn.
Okay.
I took my turn, and so then I went back into the Air Force as a civilian.
Yes. Was that programming those flight simulators, or what was that? California.
Yeah, that's California at Luke Air Force Base, and we spent our time doing trainers, basically, and they were for all kinds of things. Whether it be, I was working on one that was for F-105, I think. I'm not sure. I'd have to recheck that. There was a F-116. I know it must have been an F-115 because the reserves had that plane. The 16 with the V with the slanted rudders on the rear there. I remember them leaving Luke when I was working in this building. It was too close to the runway. Boy, it really was loud. They would go down to the Barry, what's his name? Barry Goldwater.
Oh, yeah.
Barry Goldwater Range down in Arizona to practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, was it there to the Pentagon, or is there something between the Pentagon and California?
No, California. No, from Phoenix, I went to California, and I got a job there who was it? It was Los Angeles Air Force Base, a very interesting Air Force base. Most air bases have they have runways because they have airplanes.
That's a good idea.
So this particular one didn't have runways. I thought that was interesting because it was in the space world.
Oh.
See, you don't need runways for
Okay. Well, space shuttles land on a runway, so this must just be the spaceship to spaceship kind of stuff.
It's before space shuttles.
Oh.
Yeah. This is when you were just putting them on big rockets and
Oh, yeah. I
launching
remember
them.
the X-15. It hung from a jet, and they launched it. Did you work on the X-15?
No, I played innocence on that point.
Well, that's cool. And then what was after California?
What was after California? Well, we didn't track Santa Claus like they did at Colorado Springs at NORAD.
That was so cool. My grandkids watch that every year.
What happened is at California was they had constellation of satellites, they call them.
Oh.
And they put them up, and that's what GPS is all about. See, GPS came from that world there. That's where GPS came. And in the early days, it was strategy not to have it too accurate for the general population.
Oh, I know. I've had some of those early GPSs.
You needed that for the military. You didn't want it for the...
Yeah, I didn't care if we fell off a cliff driving using GPS in the mountains. Oh, there's nothing there. Yeah, you guys are sneaky.
Yeah, but it eventually got better, of course.
Yeah.
And I think we've all heard of GPS by now, probably.
Yeah, it's all I couldn't drive to Oklahoma City without it.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that we helped you out.
Well, I need a lot of help. So then where were we traveling from California?
Where are we going from California? Well, I went in the wintertime because it's always nicer weather, you know. I went from one coast to the other coast.
Oh, was that the D.C. area? Or?
Yeah, over there. They call it Northern Virginia, but there's no such state. I've looked at the map.
Well, it's probably top secret. If you could find it, you couldn't talk about it.
No, but then I spent time at some people call it the Puzzle Palace. It's otherwise known as the Pentagon.
The Pentagon. Well, that's cool. And you, how long were you at the Pentagon?
Oh, until I graduated. So I was there. How long was I there? I think I was there 3 or 4 years.
And you were like the liaison between the Senate or the Congress and the Air Force, or how was the connection?
First job I was in was data mining. You know, we're good at data mining.
Yes.
Data mining. I was only mining people who were to represent the Air Force in Congress. You know, I needed to know what leanings they had and those kind of things. And so we were going to, you know.
Okay. Yeah, you're checking them out. Okay. Because I keep thinking as a liaison, you were kind of related between the Congress and the Air Force, but you were mostly tracking them.
Yeah, I was tracking them.
Okay. Okay. This is going to be a private video.
Well, let's see what else.
But the Pentagon, but you were there for 4 years?
I think it was 3.
3, and I remember you talking about them reinforcing one part of the Pentagon, and lo and behold, what happened to that reinforced part of the Pentagon?
It got unreinforced, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
But anyway,
9/11 had a big effect on you, like it did everybody. But you were right there when the plane hit, right in your building.
I was in a meeting in the Pentagon. I was in 5E1015, which was a staff meeting for my boss and all his division chiefs, basically.
Well, that's cool. And we're going to show these pictures of you. Show the bombing, or not the bombing, the plane hitting, and all the damage it did to the building. And it was really good they reinforced that part. But I mean, the pictures are they really tell the story of how severe this was.
Yeah, it was a tough day. It was harder on my wife than it was on me, I think.
Yeah.
Because she didn't know where I was.
Didn't know what was going on.
Happened. And I remember we bailed out of the building. That means we walked down the steps.
ran down the steps.
Yeah. And so security was as confused as everybody else, and so they would move us over here and over there in the parking lot, and eventually we went down under the interstate on the south side, and we had this smoke and the fumes from the jet fuel and all following us, and I got in there, and you get into a big mall down there, several stories high, and I remember watching the food court, because if you got 30,000 extra folks around, they run out of food stocks.
Oh, very fast.
So yeah, they bring these, the cage wall that they put over everything when they close up. So they started letting those down because they're running out of food stocks.
Yeah, we didn't want to ride it with people wanting M&Ms or whatever it was. And, well, was it a really big crash sound? What happened when actually the jet hit?
I remember sitting at the table, and one of the guys said, that felt like an airplane crash.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel it. But you think about it, it's a concrete reinforced building, and a shockwave went through the thing, because I was sort of on the southwest side. Southeast, I'd say southeast.
Kind of the opposite side of the crash?
Yeah, and the planes came in there, that one plane came in, and I hit sort of on the division, that one sector, they call them sectors there. One of those sectors was being renovated, so there was nobody in it to speak of. And then the other one had some people in it, and so there were 300 and some, I think. But if they had been populated, it would have been a lot worse.
Yeah, and that building, it's what, 7 sides, or Pentagon's 5 sides? 5 sides, and you got several layers of walls inside that, and then separations. So it's kind of like it was built for impact, because it wasn't like one solid wall all the way through it. It had all these separations, corridors between, between the rooms.
It was built before air conditioning, so you had these concentric pentagons. And you had space between them with windows so that you could get air.
Oh, that's what that was. I thought maybe it was for crash and impact. And
I think it was built low so that the planes wouldn't run into it. They were going to whatever the airport is there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty big bomb. You get a giant jet with all that full of fuel. You got a giant bomb.
But anyway, the 5-sided building, and it's built low. And it was built very quickly, I think. If you go back and look at the history.
Well, yeah, we're going to show these pictures. These pictures really tell a story. It's awesome, and it's amazing amount of damage it did.
We probably ought to put too many of those out.
Okay, well, show some of these pictures.
I'll show them to the audience.
Well, yeah, okay, don't show me. Yeah, it would be top secret.
Yeah. And I would see your clearance.
Well, I have some clearances, and I know Clarence, so we're doing good now. Was that when you retired? Was at the Pentagon, or we're working there?
Yes, after 9/11/2001, I graduated. I retired in when was it? 2002.
That's a long time ago. I didn't realize that.
End of April.
Wow.
Yeah, you were a little guy at that time, I guess.
I remember watching the whole thing on TV all day long. So I guess I was working at home. I don't know what I was doing. Who knows? I was probably doing some top secret thing. But anyway, well, that is so cool. And then now you're just been fishing and running around the country in your RV. You and Grace just having a good old time.
I used to do more of that than I do of late.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to cover your job description, because you've worked for all these really big, cool, awesome stuff, and making simulators for the jet fighters. All that is really cool. Working at the Pentagon is really cool. Working at NORAD, where it's all made to yes. Well, yeah, and it's made to actually take a hit from an atomic bomb and all that granite or whatever it is, a mile of granite, and all that stuff. I mean, you've done the stuff that I would never even thought about applying for any of those places. I mean, it's just that's what's so interesting about your life is the kind of jobs that you had. And I mean, I don't know anybody that did all that. I mean, that was telling the truth when they told you that. But
it's really interesting. When I was in Cheyenne Mountain, I don't know. There's a movie out that's not too far off, and you had 3-story buildings that are articulated on springs, and the walkways are articulated so that you can walk without.
That's the cool stuff. So we need you to just go through and report on all that. You just write a book about the history because it's top secret, or you just don't care anymore.
I can't remember.
Can't remember your passcode to get in the Pentagon anymore. I don't remember what it is. That's okay.
Where is it?
You have to get in the government now. You can run for president or Congress, or you can do all kinds of stuff now.
I've used my quota.
Oh. Well, it's cool. I mean, it's very interesting, and I hope everybody enjoyed watching this. We're going to talk to you and Grace about your Greeley stories and what you did, teaching school and some of those things. And yeah. But it's cool. But you may or may not see this video. It could be top secret. It could be censored. So just hope it's you that gets to see this movie. Okay, push the button. So now.
Oh, wow. She did that.
Blow those noses, blow. Camera.
Come on. It's up like this.
Becky, look. Sis.
I need more.
Dude, put it all over your nose and like face plant it.
5.
Unfair, Sarah.
Is my mistake
And 50 seconds.
Now, for the rest of the story, it's not just Roland. I mean, I know we talk about him a lot, but actually it's Roland and Grace, his wife of 57 years. Well, Grace, tell us a little about what you did. I mean, I'll know you're part of it. You guys met. Was it Abilene you met?
We met at Abilene. Actually, I picked him out for the first date.
Well, you picked him out. Whoa. Breaking news.
I was a member of a social club, and we had a party that we were supposed to bring a date to. And since I wasn't going steady with anyone, I looked around and found this guy with a big smile. And I'm not sure he even knew who I was when I asked him, but he said yes.
Well, that's good. Good thing you said yes. This has worked out for you.
Yeah.
Now, you both graduated from Abilene?
Yes.
We did.
And then you moved to Colorado, and then
We had looked for 2 teaching jobs, and nothing was happening, and so we got a teaching job from somebody that we were kind of connected with in Greeley, and he said yes, and I didn't have a job, and we went up and didn't find me a job for 2 or 3 years. And so after I learned to cook the first year and read a bunch of library books and was bored, applied for some jobs that they wouldn't hire me for, because when you put down you have a college degree, they don't want to hire you to sell nylons because they think you'll quit after a month. Anyway, and so I went to graduate school and got a master's. And then after I finished that, I was hired at Windsor Elementary, which was out in the country, but not far, and taught chemistry and physics and algebra.
cool.
Yeah.
And then you were, because you were like a science and math teacher too at Greeley and Windsor. Wow, that's awesome. And then you guys went around the world with all these jobs. You kept switching jobs all the time.
Yes. After I had taught for, 2 years, 3 years? Anyway, I decided it was time to have a family. And so I didn't work after that until the children were out of high school.
Oh, that's cool. And I know you guys won a family award, and he touched on that too. But that's pretty cool because, that shows you a lot of accomplishment there. And, your kids have grown up to be great young people. And it's cool how all this works out for you. But tell us a little more about what you did through all those years. I mean, now you guys went to Minnesota, you went to Arizona, you went to California, you went to North Virginia, wherever it doesn't exist. And, I mean, you had a lot of projects to do along the way, too.
Well, you set up the house, every time you move, you need different curtains or a rug, and that was my job. Meals always take time. Children take lots of time, So I was devoted to them, and we went to church regularly, so I participated. I think I've taught children all the way from 6 months old up to women that are adults. My favorite age is like a 4-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And I like the babies that you put them in little chairs and they can't get out.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's cool. I guess you were probably the head scorpion hunter in Arizona?
Oh, yes. I manage the scorpions. What you do when they crawl across the ceiling, you get a glass jar and put it over them, and then you slide a piece of paper or cardboard between them and the ceiling and clunk them down in the jar and put the lid on and do whatever you want to with your scorpion then.
Cool. You fry them up for breakfast or something, huh? I don't know what they do with scorpions. They have to have some kind of purpose.
I don't know. We got to be careful of them. I was going through the garage once and reached down in a box, and one got me.
Oh,
Yeah.
then what
It
happened?
was a real scorpion. It wasn't the end of the world. It turns out I went down to the doctor, but I'm not sure I had to. I think
Turn blue or swell up or what?
a big scorpion. The ones you have to watch out for, the little ones.
Oh, the ones you can't see.
The ones that have the poison
They
concentrated.
just watched him see you didn't swell up or,
Yeah, like a snake back.
yeah, right.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Because we were right across from this big place called the Squaw Peak Park, I think.
Oh yeah.
But it was a big area.
It was a desert park in the middle of town. And we could walk over. I mean, it was just out our front door and past one house, and then we were in the desert. We went out there one time. I'll tell you a little story. And it was, the sun was setting, and it was beautiful, and we walked, and we went up over a hill and down into a valley. And this is, the saguaro cactus that have the arms on them, and the cholla that come up like this and have the flowers on top. And it was all new to us. And the ground wasn't covered, so you could step around the cactus and the thorns and the such. And then it started getting dark, and I said, we better turn around and go back. And then it got dark, and then it got darker, and all we could see was a little white rocks that were popping up. And I said, well, I know it's that away. And they said, is it really? Is it really? And it was kind of scary because we were out there in the desert with all the thorns and the bushes, and we just carefully, put our foot down before we ran into a cactus and walked, and eventually we got to where we could see the lights, and we got home. But it's a big park, and it's got mountains in it, so you could really get lost if you...
Well, that's cool. I've been in Texas where they had scorpions and all that stuff at night, and the cactus, and you had to really watch where you were going from cabin to cabin. But I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but can you remember what happened when you heard about the Pentagon, or you knew that Roland was lost in some mall looking for food?
For a little bit, is that?
Yeah, you could digress. You guys want to counsel each other, or
No, I want to digress because on the wildlife out in the desert,
yeah,
you got these road runners. They really
Yes.
they really do
they
exist.
do run. They don't fly, do they?
Well, they fly very fast, evidently, low.
No, they have their feet on the ground.
Yeah, they have their feet on the ground, so I guess they're trying yet. They're in try mode.
Okay.
But anyway, so there's lots of wildlife out there, and snakes and coyotes and things like that.
Well, I heard those road runners eat on those big cactus things that they poke holes in them, and if it's for net, because I know that they're a protected cactus, and so it's a big fine if you go out and blow them away or shoot them like a lot of people used to do. But okay, are you done digressing?
I'll digress back.
Okay. So it's up to you if you want to talk about this. But what was going on through your mind during the Pentagon when that plane crashed in there and you didn't know what Roland was doing?
Well, that was a Thursday morning, I think, ladies' Bible class, and I had seen where you could meet with a group to identify birds. And so I think at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, I went out with a group, and we were looking for birds in the top of the trees way up high, and we found some. And then I got in the car and was going to ladies' Bible class, and they said on the radio, announcement, something's going on, but they didn't know what. And then before I got to the building, they said something about the Pentagon. And I said, but they weren't sure what it was. They said there's been some kind of fire, at the Pentagon. So I thought, And then by the time the ladies' Bible class was over, they knew there was a terrorist attack. And I guess they knew that it was an airplane that flew into the Pentagon. And so I thought, oh my goodness, what do I do? So I decided, well, I'll go home and wait for a phone call, because I knew as soon as he could, he would call me. Well, has you told about what you were doing during that time?
More or less. I was down in that shopping center.
Yeah, scrambling for food, I guess.
Well, no, I just, there might be a crisis here, and you get close to the food, right?
The survival mode got to kick in.
Anyway, it was like 2:30, and all that time I had I watched the towers collapse 3 or 4 times, and I said, "This is not doing me any good. I think I'll turn it off." And so I just walked around, kind of in a state of, not shock exactly, but waiting. And I talked to one of my neighbors, and I called a couple of people. Then I said, I shouldn't be on the phone because they might call me. So I borrowed a cell phone from somebody because I didn't have one at that time. And he finally called me from the parking lot. He had gotten on the metro and gotten back to where I was supposed to pick him up because I had the car that day. One of those periods where we just had one vehicle. So I went out and got him, and it was really good to hear him call. And then I called Becky and I called Jeffrey and let them know what was going on.
Yes, I had quite a time getting home that night, really, because I went south into that shopping center, and I was up on the 3rd floor looking through the window because they had closed this Ruby Tuesdays basically, but they had the television pointed out, and they had the banner going across the bottom, and that's how I knew what it was.
Yeah.
Because I just knew something was terribly wrong, and so basically tried to go on down, try to find the people that had gone all the way south. I remember one event that was very interesting. There are lots of disadvantaged folks, physically or whatever, that work on the maintenance crews in the Pentagon and clean it up.
Right.
And it was... this big group was almost marching in real order formation, so they were totally organized and going more organized than most folks. Actually, I saw a lot of stars on the street that day.
Yeah.
Going down that
Generals,
direction. Yeah, generals.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. Because
Generals wearing them.
yeah, because that's good. I mean, I'm sure they got all these plans in effect for what something happens, do this, that, and the other. Now, did you get debriefed over what you heard and saw, or were you in the wrong side of the building when they wouldn't?
As we're going south, the diesel fuel and foams, smoke was following us, and so we got a little bit of compensation for that, but not much.
Yeah.
But it was a very confusing time, and trying to figure out what's going on, because the shopping center, they started closing everything down because they didn't know what was going on either, and they sure didn't need any more folks in there, and so they sort of locked you in. Well, you weren't locked in, but no new people coming in.
Yeah.
So it was. But then when I tried to get out, I would normally take the train, which had been the blue line, goes by the Pentagon. It goes pretty close to it. I think it was concerned about there'd be a bomb on that would go through and try to blow up part of the Pentagon or something like that.
Yeah.
So nobody knew what was going on.
That's true. Everybody was confused that day. The president, he didn't know what was happening. And everything.
To the turnstiles to get on the train. And the turnstiles, they stopped it then because of the concern about going by them.
Yeah.
But eventually they cleared it, and so I went, and then I would follow and go to the blue line up to the orange line. Well, I would go a bus down the Dulles toll road. That's the way I usually would go in, take a bus from the park and ride in Reston, Virginia, and then going into the Pentagon. That's the way I got it.
Well, that was a pretty exciting time. And
I remember the neighborhood after I got home, though. It was real eerie because, everybody was out on the street. Not everybody, but a lot of people, and they were setting up candles, at different places. And so there was a lot of concern in the neighborhood about what was going on.
Yeah, that was confusing for everybody. I'm sure it was a scary time for you folks.
It was also real weird because our house was about 4 miles from the major airport, Dulles Airport, and they'd grounded all the planes for, I think, a month, and it was quiet. It just seemed odd, just eerie quiet.
Yeah, it would be strange. Yeah, it was a rough time. And we're in Oklahoma City where they had a rough time, a while back. We just went to a park today, had a memorial thing for that.
Okay.
I forgot about some of that stuff, but this country heals up good. But it's always sad when these things happen.
Yes.
Well, cool.
The one nice thing that happened right after this was all the elementary schools, the children made pictures. and dedicated them to, the people in the Pentagon and service, and then the Pentagon people put them on the walls, on all the halls, and you see all these children's drawings and their patriotism. And the patriotism that showed at that time was really, really heartwarming.
Oh, yeah. Our patriotism is like we are one big family, the whole country. I mean, we're all citizens, and that's awesome.
I remember those banners. They would bring them in. They bring them in from lots of elementary schools, especially it seemed, and they would tape them inside the Pentagon on the walls.
Yeah.
And I remember one time when President George Bush came through, and I was in line, and I shook his hand, and so I didn't wash my hand for a while.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do. Well, I guess. Yeah, that was cool.